We're so good at adapting that the probability that we can just adapt to this is 100%.
And I agree. What do you mean, who is this? It's Potholer. Okay, I popped up at the beginning of this video just to show that it's not AI generated. And I can assure you that if there was artificial intelligence involved, it wouldn't have come up with a face like this. So, can we please get back to the point? I agree with Jordan Peterson. Hang on a second. Can we just go over here for a minute? As I was saying, of course we'll adapt, because any time people get hit by a disaster, or as some might call it, a minor inconvenience, they really don't have much choice but to adapt to it. When London was heavily bombed during the Second World War, people adapted. Children were sent into the countryside, and many of those who stayed behind slept in air raid shelters. That doesn't mean they enjoyed adapting. People didn't enjoy it, they adapted because they had no choice. But it's weird, because when people do have a choice and can adapt to new technologies that mitigate a problem, we often choose not to. We find any excuse we can to put things off. If a tile breaks on your roof and a rainstorm is coming, the smart person would adapt by fixing the problem. The not so smart person would find any excuse to do nothing. Maybe the rain won't come, he hopes, and if it does come, maybe it won't be too bad. And if it is bad, we'll adapt. When the water rots the trusses and the ceiling comes down, we'll adapt by sleeping in another room. And if the whole house becomes uninhabitable, well, we'll adapt by moving into a tent. Those who followed the concerted attack on climate science over the last 3 decades will see a parallel. Every time evidence shows that the world is warming and the evidence that CO2 is responsible is overwhelming, they just find a new argument for doing nothing. Or, as Christopher Monckton put it,
the correct policy is to have the courage to do nothing.
Monckton was part of a movement in the early 2000s claiming that we don't need to do anything because the world isn't warming. It's all a conspiracy of incompetent and corrupt scientists. When the evidence clearly showed that the scientists were right, the world was warming, the argument for doing nothing changed to, okay, it's warming, but it's the sun. And when it clearly wasn't the sun, God-fearing scientist Roy Spencer proclaimed there's probably a natural reason for all the warming. Then that changed to,
I think that most of the warming we've seen could well be natural.
Then it became half is natural.
I think about half of it's natural.
And a few years later, Roy Spencer finally admitted that CO2 could be the main cause of warming. And the so-called skeptics finally caught up with what scientists have been saying all along. It looks like they get it now.
Climate change is a real challenge. It is something that we should be concerned about. Neither Matt nor I are saying that we shouldn't also be cutting carbon emissions.
But you're not actually saying we should. So why do I get the feeling we're about to hear a but?
But that's not the question in front of you. The question in front of you is, can humans adapt to climate change? And the overwhelming answer is yes, because we've done so in many different ways before.
There it is. The reason why we don't really need to do anything, just like the broken tile on the roof, is because we'll adapt. Well, what else do you expect Bjorn Lomborg to say? He's the guy who manipulated figures about electric cars. His lobby group gets paid to say we shouldn't do anything.
We're a very adaptive species. We live pretty much everywhere on the planet. We live in frigid Greenland and in hot, humid Singapore. We live on ranges that are much grander than anything climate can throw at us. And that's because we already adapt.
Yeah, we do. I mean, when humans migrated around the world, they built their houses and changed their clothing to adapt to the new climate. Problem is, that adaptation took tens of thousands of years. Unfortunately, the changes we're going to experience during our lifetimes, not just locally but worldwide, are going to be much bigger and faster than our ancestors faced. And adapting to those changes is going to need more than just putting on a pair of shorts and turning up the air conditioning. Don't just take my word for it. Let's test Lomborg's claim by looking at how well we've done by adapting so far. Here are 3 direct consequences of global warming that we're seeing that even conspiracy theorists will find hard to deny. Good luck if you want to try blaming them on something else. Then we'll see how well humans have adapted. First, here's a pretty simple one. Global warming has started melting permafrost in Arctic settlements, and this is the result. Houses that used to be stable on frozen soils are now sinking. Roads are subsiding and water infrastructure is cracking. So, how have people adapted to that? Well, by losing their homes, or paying to repair their houses and paying bigger insurance premiums and paying higher taxes to repair the roads and the infrastructure. Sure, that's adapting, but is it a good thing? Would people rather not have the problem in the first place? Second example is permafrost thawing in the Alps. These high peaks have been frozen for millions of years, and ice has become the glue keeping rocks together. Now it's thawing, the rocks are becoming unglued, and the result is an increasing number of rockfalls. I did a story on this a few years ago, and as luck would have it, a rockfall happened on the other side of a valley while I was in the middle of an interview about rockfalls.
Novembre jusqu'au mois de mars, avril. Maintenant, c'est plutôt à partir du mois de décembre.
So the snow used to be around from around November to March, April. Now the snow doesn't begin until December, and we're just getting a rockfall here. The other side of the valley, these rocks are just crashing down into the valley below from where the glacier has been. I don't think there can be a better example of how the glue that has held these rocks together and held that mountain together is now coming apart, and the rocks are so loose they're just falling down.
En descendant, l'hiver.
So, how have people adapted to this? Well, the authorities have closed off roads and stopped hiking and mountaineering trips, so I guess people have adapted by being restricted on where they can go. Meanwhile, local residents have adapted by paying higher insurance premiums, or they have to cough up money for the reconstruction of their houses. In other words, adapting pretty much amounts to doing nothing, just as Moncton recommended, until you're forced to pay for the consequences of doing nothing. Good plan. Finally, the third example is in Bolivia. Warmer temperatures have melted glaciers and ice reservoirs in the Andes, causing water shortages in cities and affecting irrigation on farms. How did people adapt? By lining up for water that gets trucked in from other parts of the country and suffering lower crop yields. So of course people will adapt, as Lomborg and Peterson rightly said.
Can humans adapt to climate change? And the overwhelming answer is yes.
We're so good at adapting that the probability that we can just adapt to this is 100%.
But they won't tell you that being forced to adapt is never pretty. Reacting to a problem rather than thinking ahead and mitigating the problem. Notice that every time we've been forced to adapt to climate change, it costs money and a deterioration in the quality of life. Or maybe critics will say that these are just minor inconveniences. If wrecked houses, closed roads and water trucks are the only consequences of global warming, then we can live with that. What's the big deal? But that's kind of the point. If we can't adapt comfortably to even the smallest and simplest consequences of global warming, it shows that this idea of we'll adapt is already not working, and climate change has only just got started. And I'm sure the critics will argue that this has only happened recently, so people haven't had time to adapt. But in fact, we've known for decades that this would happen, and there's been plenty of time to prepare for it. Ironically, the very people who say we need to adapt are at the same time telling us climate change is not going to be as bad as the scientists have calculated. So we shouldn't even prepare to adapt by developing infrastructure and new technologies for the future. Just sit back and hope for the best. Well, let me answer this way. So far, the climate scientists have been right all along. They were right in their predictions that the world was going to warm, as the critics now admit, and they were even right about the amount of warming we could expect for a given rise in CO2. So far, they've also been right about the consequences. By the way, watch the comments section where you'll inevitably see this kind of comment. Scientists got their predictions completely wrong. always respond by asking for an example, because they never quote a scientific paper, they just give a prediction they read in a newspaper or something they saw on TikTok or Fox News, claiming that scientists predicted New York would be underwater by 2020 or we'd be in an ice age by now. So I'm happy to agree that newspapers and TikTok and TV shows often get their facts wrong. But when it comes to published science, and we're talking about whether the scientists have got it right, the predictions have been spot on. Meanwhile, the predictions of the critics have been completely wrong. Even the ones who have an understanding of climate science, they're finally catching up a couple of decades too late. So betting the future of humanity on a bunch of amateurs, Christian fundamentalists, bloggers, lobbyists and TV personalities, most of whom know nothing about climate science and whose predictions have been consistently disproved by events, is not a very safe bet. The only other argument for doing nothing—
the number one thing you want to do is drive energy prices as low as they possibly can be.
That it would cost too much to switch from fossil fuels to clean energy had some merit 20 years ago. But now even that objection is obsolete. Wind power is now much cheaper than coal-fired power, and even the Coal Museum has adapted to using solar panels. Same with electric cars. Cheaper, cleaner and quieter. You'd think that if the critics were so good at adapting, they'd find it easy to adapt to these new forms of energy and transportation. But no, they're so reluctant to adapt that they'd rather fudge the figures, as Bjorn Lomborg did, than admit the new technology is better and cheaper. I mean, just look at how challenging it was for these advocates of adaptation to adapt to new energy-efficient light bulbs. You'd think the world had come crashing down.
People are going to suffer, they're losing their jobs, and they're losing their choice in the marketplace.
But sadly, that's human nature. As a species, we fight tooth and nail to avoid any kind of change until we're forced to change, by which time it's too late. Because, let's face it, who wants to get up off the couch and fix a broken tile? And a final word, I've got an update on the contributions to the charity that I support, and I ask you to contribute in lieu of a Patreon account or any kind of monetization of this channel. We've nearly reached $500,000, which is an amazing result, thanks to all my subscribers who've contributed. Your contributions in the name of Potholer 54 are always noted, and that's how I know that this money came from you guys, and it's allowed the charity, Health in Harmony, to expand its operations into other parts of the world. It's a charity that trades protection of the rainforests for affordable health care, and it's transformed the lives of people who live around forests and protected the forest from degradation. Two birds with one stone, and it's been recognized internationally for its amazing results. Please take a look. The links are in the video description.